Today we're going to be reviewing the lower extremity things, so we'll go over hip, knee, and subtables. Yeah, so right here I've just listed we have Dr. Campbell and Sue, of course, to help with anything. Also, we will be letting out of class 15 minutes early because 4:15 has their exam today, so we'll end things around 8 o'clock. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start. So unlike the midline things, the trunk, cervical, the girdle, there's a lot of different movement possibilities for the hip, knee, and subtalar. So I just listed those all out on here. This document will be posted on Moodle after today's class. So we will have to review here. So let's just start with some hip stuff. So we'll start with this example. What motion occurs at the hip if her starting position is the anatomical position of the hip, and this is her finished position. So I'll give you all a couple minutes to figure this out. What y'all think? Yes, I think correct. Yeah, so her starting position is anatomical, so her foot is in line with her other foot, and then she's moving her hip towards her midline. So we kind of touch. Here we have another hip question. So what motion occurs at her right hip when she moves from left to the right? Does that picture make sense? She's doing like this. Okay, she's turning. Not the people on Zoom can see that very well. So what is her starting position of the hip? Anatomical, and then where is her sternum looking in the second picture? Her right hip. So what motion do we say has to occur? Yes. And I feel like what I said was confusing, but Yeah, because sternum would be more like trunk stuff. So for this one, a good landmark would be where is like her knee compared to where her hip is. And her knee is like a little bit more internal. You could even use your foot as a landmark here since her knee is extended. But yes, it would be internal position. Okay, and then we'll do this one. What motion is observed?
Emma, do you mind going back to that picture? You bring up a great point that I want to add to about that knee, specifically that kneecap, right? Because although we can make that foot disappear, remember the examples where we were on a knee, you know, where like we had a knee on the ground. So you didn't have the foot as a reference. So I'm so glad you brought up that the knee, you can't remove the knee, you can't make the knee disappear. So I'm glad you brought that up, that the foot may not be there if you're kneeling and you can still have internal, you know, or external rotation. So that's a really good landmark you brought up.
Yes, now we'll do motion from 1 to 2.
Guys, while y'all are considering the answer, I love how you guys highlighted the, or capitalized the A, B, and AD. I just want to reiterate that I will not do as such. So we just need to make sure we're in that habit of differentiating between A, B, and AD. I love this as a teaching tool for us, but on the test, I'm not going to have those highlighted like that. So we just need to reiterate the difference between the abs and the ads.
Going back to like the knee being used as a reference point for hip internal and external rotation, are there like any like illusions that'll look like it's hip internal rotation, external rotation, but it's actually the opposite when looking at the knee as a landmark?
No, the kneecap is a great landmark to use, but at the end of the day, it's all about spin, right? And relative to the femur and the socket. So I think the number one biggest illusion is that when we communicate or when we name external and internal rotation, we're looking at how the femur moves about the hip or the socket, right? We always name things based off of the smaller piece moving about the bigger piece. But in human movement, we can move bigger pieces around the smaller pieces, but they're going to move in opposition. So I think the number one illusion was the one that Emma and Grace did, where you're standing and you transverse pelvic girdle rotate. And our instinct is to want to say, well, this must be external because my socket is moving in the same global way as my femur, but that's not how it works. So I think that's the biggest illusion is to make sure you don't just say, well, if anything spins this way, it must be right external, or if anything spins that way, it must be left external. And that's why it's important to look at where am I at, where did I go, and how did I have to move to get there? So when you do this, your right hip is internally rotated, and I can use that kneecap as a reference to see how my femur has spun in relative to my socket. So it's all about the femur spinning, and the kneecap is a great landmark because it's always going to be connected to the femur distally. You can't make the kneecap unless you dislocate it. So that's why specifically not the knee, but the kneecap, the patella is a great landmark. Does that answer your question, Tyson? What a great question.
Yes, sir. That answered it perfectly.
Awesome. I appreciate that input.
No problem.
All right, guys, so what would y'all get for this answer? Right hip adduction. Yeah. Okay, and then for this question, I didn't put any answer choices, but I just want you to identify how her right hip is and the transverse plane.
Can I add an extra part of that question, just for, since we're practicing? As a separate question, I would love to, what is the position of her right hip in the sagittal plane? I'd like to add that one as well, just as a practice, because this goes into where we emphasized about the socket's perspective of sagittal and frontal, and the femur's perspective for transverse. So answer them as two separate questions, and that'll help us to practice the concepts of the positions in the different planes. That's a really good picture and question, guys.
So what do y'all think her position is? And let's start with the sagittal plane. It's flexed, yeah. The right hip is flexed, and then in the transverse plane, it's also opposite rotated. Perfect. So her right hip is both externally rotated and flexed. And for a little bonus, we'll go over the left hip. So this one's a little bit harder to see, but I'll give you all a couple minutes. We'll do the transverse plane and sagittal plane for the left hip. All right, so what do y'all think her left hip position is in the sagittal plane? Extended, yes, and then in the transverse plane? Horizontal. So transverse plane is gonna be internal or external. External, yes. So I know this one's hard to see, and I could see why you might think it's the ab and adduction. But like if she started out with her back leg like completely straight, in order to get to that position, she would have to externally rotate to create that kind of angle with her hips.
Yeah, I see this one more of like how she will get her back leg, like what would it look like if her back leg was actually in the front? So I don't know if any of y'all did like gymnastics or anything, but there's the whole like butterfly. All she did was extend her leg. So it kind of is like the same. So we looked at the sagittal plane, you see that it's extended, but both knees are doing the same thing in relation to the hip. So that's kind of how I see that one.
This one is a little more subtle awkward. But yes, so I want you to see what his position of both of his hips are. And yeah, think in terms of like frontal plane.
Use the belt line as a clue, guys.
This don't really have nothing to do with that question, but like when we're talking hip horizontal abduction and adduction, what would be like the keys to look out for that? Like, what would be the scenarios where like that would be a good
So,
answer to?
practically speaking, like it's regular ab and adduction, but you're just in the pelvis's transverse plane. So in other words, instead of standing and your hips do this as a mirror, now imagine you are sitting, like if you're sitting in a chair and your hips go out or come in. Or if you're standing and you flex, so the femurs didn't move at all, but now you do like abductions in the pelvis's transverse plane. It's a variation of ab and adduction. So it's horizontal ab and adduction when the ab and adduction occurs in the pelvis's transverse plane. That's where the horizontal comes from, the horizon. So you think about, the horizon of this, of the view of the sunset. So horizontal ab and adduction is just regular ab and adduction, but instead of the pelvis's frontal plane, like regular ab and ad, it's the pelvis's transverse plane. So I'm going to use my shoulder, but it's the same joint as the hip, right? So we have regular ab, but now I can do horizontal ad or I can do regular ad. So regular ab, horizontal ad, and then extension. But that horizontal ad is really just like regular ad. Watch, I'll give you an example. So this would be regular ab, but if I flexed, now this would be horizontal ab and ad, and it would be the same for the hip. So it's regular ab and adduction, but just in a different plane. So like regular ab, but if I flex, this would be horizontal ab. Tyson, does that
So
answer
like,
that? Uh-huh.
so like for example, it
Yeah,
would be like if I was trying to stretch out my hip flexors and
yeah.
I would do like leg swings, that would be like horizontal ab and
Yeah,
ad.
yeah, that's cool. So like if you rotated your pelvis though, right, to get those leg swings in the transverse plane, absolutely. That would be horizontal ab as you swing your leg up and horizontal ad as you swing your leg back in. Absolutely.
Gotcha, that answered it perfectly.
Yeah. And what's cool is that it would behoove you to do that, because if you were in the regular frontal plane, your leg would smack into your other leg, right? So it's good to kind of have that flexion, so that way your leg can swing, like a pendulum in the horizontal A, B, and AD, and you don't have to, hit your other leg while it swings through.
All right, I get it. That made perfect sense.
All right, let's go over this question. So to answer it, we'll start with his right hip first. So how do y'all think his right hip is positioned? Mhm. It's abducted. And then what about his left hip? Abducted, yes. So I know it's very subtle and it can be kind of hard to see. This is a good one where I feel like standing up and doing the motion of like how he got to this position, I can like look down at my knees and kind of see what's happening a little bit more. But I could also just like, if this was on my screen, I could maybe put like my pencil or something where he is and see like, okay, I know this is like the center, like how are the feet compared to like where my pencil is? Are they like closer to it or further away from it?
Grace,
Uh,
I want to add a quick thing that works for me. It may not work for everybody, but always try to look at the belt line level. So in other words, if you tilt your left ear to your left shoulder, like literally tilt your head to see the belt line is level, to me that really emphasizes how the hips are deviated from the sockets. Just looking at the belt line level, you could really see how that right hip is abducted and that left hip is adducted. That's a trick that really works for me. It may not work for everybody else, but tilting your head to see the pelvis is level really emphasizes those deviations to me.
what you got for him? Okay, so now we're gonna kind of talk about the knee a little bit. So for this one, I just want you to analyze what the position of her left knee is and the transverse. So if it's hard for y'all to see, her foot kind of comes out to the side like that. And then her knee is flexed here.
Grace, use your pin to project out into the class where her kneecap is looking. It's rotate your pin like almost like your pin is pointing at the screen, just to show them where the kneecap is pointing relative to the foot. Lift your pin, put your pin like in the AP axis, like rotate your pin so that it's literally point, there you go, and point where that pin is looking, where the patella would be facing. Like if the patella was facing forward, it would kind of be more to my right, right? It'd be kind of looking at the left side of class. Does that make sense? Like there you go. And so you could kind of see where the patella is looking relative to the foot, and maybe that could kind of give them a different perspective of your question. It's just a different way to look at it. That's all.
All right, guys, what y'all get for this one? Okay, so we can work through this one. So I played sports. I don't know if any of y'all played sports. So I know that in this picture, she's planting and turning. So in my head, I go like this, and then I freeze right it, and my knee is on the inside of my toes. Does that make sense? So in order to do that, come back here to anatomical, keep my balance. You have to have external rotation to get that knee on the outside, on the inside of your toes. Does that make sense to everybody?
Emma, that's a really great point. And to Emma's point, the knee being on the inside of the toes is the same as saying the toes are on the outside of the knee. So whatever way you see it best, but Emma is 100% right. Those things are relative to each other, and that's why it's externally rotated.
Yeah, and then another thing, like the reason the knee can move in the transverse plane is because the knee is also flexed here. Yeah. That's why it can move there. If it was extended, it would not be able to move in the transverse.
And remember, guys, the knee allows that rotation when you're flexed, because that's when you're pressing down, right? You can't really press into the ground when you're locked. So you got to flex that knee in order to drive that foot in the ground to change direction. And so that's why the knee gives some rotation, because if it didn't, you'd rip your knee off every time you tried to cut and plant. So that's why we have that rotation in the knee.
I think we have time for one more. Maybe let's do just like an ankle one. Let's do this one. So what motion is observed at the ankle from left picture to the right picture? And I'll give y'all time to do that. All right, so what is the starting position of the ankle? Anatomical and in position. Yes, so we must have had ankle dorsiflexion to get to that final position. I know this is kind of like an example of a illusion, because it's the big part movement about the small, not small about the big. So just something to look out for. Okay, let's do this. So what position must you maintain to keep the towel held against it? What do y'all think? Ankle barefoot. Yeah, and then, yeah, just remember the subtalar has nothing to do with plantar dorsiflexion, and that has to do with inversion. Speaking of, I can just run through this real quick. So what motion occurs from the right picture to the left?
I want to warn everybody on my answer choices. I could have ankle as an answer choice, right? So we just, even though that's how hard this stuff is imprinted is. So just make sure you realize that the ankle is not involved in the wobble, that it's the subtalar.
Alright, so for this one, we're looking at his left foot. The first position is anatomical, and the final position, his subtalar is inverted. So we must have had a subtalar inverted. Everybody saw that?
Oh, I read it, I did last right.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and once again, we'll have these posted, we'll put all the answers on there so you can go back and test yourself and look at the ones we didn't go over today. But yeah, I hope this was helpful, a good review to start thinking about things for your business. And yeah. Keep reaching
Good
out.
job, everybody. We'll see you guys later.